Russia. Between 1500 and 1800, Russia made tremendous territorial gains and became a major European power. Slavs elsewhere lost ground and were taken over by other powers. In southeastern Europe, the Ottoman Turks ruled most of the Balkan Peninsula, and the Serbs, Bosnians, and Macedonians who lived there. Under the Ottomans, some of the Slavs converted to Islam, while the rest remained Eastern Orthodox. Hungary, ruled by the Croats, and Austria, controlled by the Slovenes. Both these Slavic peoples remained Roman Catholic and oriented to Western Europe. In Central Europe, Austria ruled the Slovaks and Czechs. Neighboring Poland had been an important European power from the late 1300s. Polish monarchs created one of the larger states of Europe, but by the 1600s, Poland had gradually weakened. Ukrainian subjects rebelled against Polish rule in the mid-1600s and allied with Russia. By 1764, almost all of Ukraine was under Russian control. In the late 1700s, Prussia, Austria, and Russia divided Poland among themselves. The Belarus region and its people, the Belarusians, passed from Polish to Russian control at this time. The rise of Russia. From the 1200s to the early 1700s, Russia was isolated from Western European developments such as the Crusades, the Renaissance, and the Reformation. Russia developed its own civilization based on the values of the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Byzantine Empire. The Russian monarchy became all-powerful and easily crushed its opponents. The nobility, the established church, and the towns, all of whom had posed repeated opposition to royal power elsewhere in Europe, never posed the same challenge in Russia. Ivan IV. The most powerful of the early czars was known as Ivan IV, who ruled from 1533 to 1584. Known as Ivan the Terrible or the Awesome, he was at once learned, religious, and cruel. Ivan became czar at the age of 3. While growing up, he was caught between rival groups of nobles who sought to rule the country. He witnessed much cruelty and was never able to rid himself of his early memories. As an adult, Ivan saw treason everywhere and arrested, exiled, or executed many of his closest advisors. In a fit of rage, he even killed his own son. Ivan took many steps against the boyars, or nobles, to reduce their potential threat to his throne. He seized their scattered lands and placed them under his direct control. The former owners were uprooted and dispersed. On the seized land, which made up of about one-half of the country, Ivan placed his own loyal people. They became a secret police force, the Oprichniki, and terrorized the rest of the country. Ivan IV also increased Russia's trade with Western Europe and worked to expand its borders. Despite Russia's vast size, it had few seaports free of ice throughout the year. Gaining more access to the sea for trade and security became a major goal of Russian rulers. During the late 1500s, Ivan conquered Mongol lands east and west of Moscow, but waged unsuccessful war against Poland, Lithuania, and Sweden for territory near the Baltic Sea. The time of troubles. After Ivan's death in 1584, Russia drifted towards chaos. During the time of troubles from 1598 to 1613, noble feuds over the throne, peasant revolts, and foreign invasions plagued the country. Finally, in 1613, an assembly of clergy, nobles, and townsmen named 17-year-old Michael Romanov as Tsar. Michael began the Romanov dynasty that ruled Russia until 1917. During the 1500s and 1600s, Russian society experienced many changes. Boyars became more closely tied to the Tsar's service, townspeople lost what little influence they had on government, and peasants were bound to the land as a virtually enslaved workforce. To escape, many peasants moved to borderlands south of Moscow. In Ukraine, some formed self-governing villages of warrior pioneers and their families and became known as Cossacks. Peasants, traders, and adventurers also moved into Siberia, the vast stretch of land east of European Russia. Peter the Great. In 1689, Peter I, known as Peter the Great, came to the throne. He was a towering figure, nearly 7 feet tall. Peter had boundless energy and volcanic emotions. During his reign, he sought to bring Russia into the mainstream of European civilization. Encounter with the West. As a young man, Peter enjoyed practical subjects such as mechanics, geography, and military strategy. He sought out tutors among the foreign community in Moscow to learn the basic skills of navigation and shipbuilding. He discovered that Russian knowledge of the outside world was quite limited. Most Russians were illiterate peasants, and only a few nobles were well educated. After becoming Tsar, Peter took an 18-month study tour of England and the Netherlands. He visited shipyards, factories, mills, and laboratories. He learned carpentry and developed enough skill in surgery and dentistry to want to practice on others. When he returned home, Peter forced the Russian nobility to adopt the ways of Western Europe. He ordered members of the court to wear Western European clothing. Men entering Moscow were forced to shave their beards or pay a fine. Women, who had always been excluded from social gatherings, were ordered to attend parties. Peter sent Russians abroad to study shipbuilding, naval warfare, mathematics, and foreign languages. He invited foreign experts to train Russians. His greatest effort to open Russia to Europe was the building of a new capital, which he named St. Petersburg. Located at the mouth of the Neva River near the Baltic Sea, St. Petersburg became Russia's window to the West. Foreign policy. Peter's goal was to make Russia a European power. He expanded Russia's borders in the south, east, and northwest. In 1689, Russia forced China to accept Russian control of Siberia. In the early 1700s, the Danish navigator Vitus Bering claimed for Russia what became known as the Bering Strait between Siberia and Alaska. Russian settlements eventually started in Alaska and even California. During much of Peter's reign, Russia fought Poland, Sweden, or the Ottoman Empire. Russian failures to win warm water ports on either the Baltic or Black Seas convinced Peter to modernize the military. His reforms paid off in 1721 when Russia defeated Sweden and won control of the eastern end of the Baltic region. Government administration. Peter made sweeping changes in the Russian government. Borrowing ideas from France, he introduced a central bureaucracy and placed local governments under his control. Peter brought the Eastern Orthodox Church under his direct authority. In place of a single independent church leader, Peter created the Holy Synod, a council of bishops responsible to the government. Peter also created a new class of nobles known as the dvoryanyi, who, in return for government service, were allowed to own hereditary landed estates. A noble's duty to the Tsar started at age 15 and continued until death. Peter used privileges and force to make the established nobility accept government service. Nobles were given full control over the serfs or peasant laborers who worked the estates and were bound to the land. While freedom for peasants had gradually increased in Western Europe, the opposite was true in Russia. Finally, Peter changed the tax laws to increase government income and efficiency. Under the plan, nobles paid no taxes. As in France, the tax burden fell on the poorest classes. Economic changes. To stimulate economic growth, Peter brought agriculture and craft production under strict government control. He gave incentives to increase business production in favored areas such as mining and metalworking. New production centers were provided with land, money, and workers. Most of the workers were tied to their trades as the serfs were to the land. Effects. Peter's reform strengthens Russia's control in foreign affairs. In his own country, however, Peter had only limited success. His domestic policies broke the traditional Eastern Orthodox culture that had united nobles and peasants. With Peter's reign, a dangerous split developed between the few who accepted European ways and the many who clung to traditional values. Many of Peter's reforms were incomplete and hasty, yet his measures brought Russia into the mainstream of Western European civilization. Catherine the Great. After Peter's death in 1725, Russia was ruled by a series of weak or ordinary monarchs. The next notable ruler was Catherine II. In 1762, Catherine seized the throne from her weak husband Peter III and ruled as Empress of Russia until 1796. Although born a German princess, Catherine easily adopted Russian ways and earned the respect of her people. As monarch, Catherine was greatly influenced by leading Western European thinkers. She studied their works and corresponded with a number of them. For a time, she believed that all people were born equal and that it was contrary to the Christian faith and to justice to make slaves of them. Early in her reign, Catherine considered freeing the serfs. A peasant rebellion that threatened her rule, however, made Catherine change her mind. To ensure the continued support of the nobles, she released them from the government service required by Peter I. She also allowed the nobles to treat their serfs as they pleased. During Catherine's reign, more peasants were forced into serfdom than ever before, and their conditions worsened. Russia's common people had fewer rights than those in any other part of Europe. When groups of them revolted, Catherine brutally crushed the uprisings. A successful foreign policy earned her the name Catherine the Great. She significantly expanded Russia's southern borders and secured a warm water port on the Black Sea. In making this gain, Russian armies defeated the Ottoman Turks. In the west, Catherine acquired territory from Poland. Prussia and Austria took the rest of Poland, which then ceased to exist until 1919. Catherine was the last of the great absolute monarchs of the 1700s. By the time of her death in 1796, new ideas of liberty and equality had spread throughout Western Europe. These new ideas directly challenged and questioned the age-old institution of monarchy.